All right, so I did my case presentation on the Golden State Killer, and this is a story that spans over 4 decades. It was popular back in 2018 to 2020 when he was in court, but it begins in the mid 1970s in Visalia, California, where a masked intruder known as the Visalia Ransacker broke into homes, stole items, obviously scared residents. And around that same time, there was a string of violent home invasions that were committed by someone known as the East Area Rapist, which these involve stalking and then control of victims. And between 1976 and 79, he committed over 50 rapes. So he binded couples, he left behind a pattern, but unfortunately the investigators could not connect that pattern yet. By the 80s, the offender moved south. His crimes unfortunately escalated to assault and murder, where he became known as the original Night Stalker. Uh, and between 1979 and 1986, he committed at least 13 homicides, or at least the ones that he admitted to. It's likely more. Um, Although the investigators collected DNA, like through shoe prints and ligatures, behavioral patterns, all that, the case went cold. But that changed in 2018, and we're going to talk about that throughout the course of the presentation. So this is the case overview. We already talked a bit about who he was and a little bit about his crime pattern, but I think what's important on this slide is the escalation. So he was getting worse over the decades. He went from burglary to rape with the couples present, to assault and murder. He was responsible for 100 burglaries, over 100, 50 sexual assaults, and 13 homicides. And like I said earlier, probably more, but that's the ones that he admitted to. That's the ones that he was caught for. He targeted mostly women and couples, and he did so at night after doing a ton of surveillance. So he was very careful because he wanted to continue his crime spree, obviously. And the victims had a wide age range, unfortunately from teens to adults in their 40s. The cause of death varied across victims. I think this again shows off like the escalation of his murders as they get increasingly more and more violent. Um, some were blunt force trauma, others by ligature strangulation, some by gunshot wounds. Um, the manner of death for every identified murder victim is homicide, so it's not disputable whether it's manslaughter or whatnot. And this is supported by evidence of intentional force, restraints, and the signs of struggle at the scenes. And then when we're talking about the mechanism of death, we're looking at like what actually led to the death, which is the cerebral hemorrhaging from head trauma, asphyxia from strangulation, or the internal damage from blood loss. So in this case, as in a lot of cases, DNA evidence is crucial to solving it. Semen samples from multiple attacks were preserved in rape kits, even decades before DNA testing existed. And these are important later because these are what made the genetic linkage across the crime scenes possible. Uh, Investigators also collected physical evidence like footprints, tool marks, hair, fibers, etc., which helped link many of the crimes as well. Um, Many of the burglarized homes from his initial attacks had the same patterns of ransacking, so this supported uh, a consistent MO. Alongside this, they took a look at behavioral evidence, so this includes stalking patterns, the pre-entry breaks, tying up couples, threatening them with firearms, and this helped the analyst to build a profile of the offender. Victim and witness testimony played a good role in this. Um, Many described a young white male with an athletic build but soft voice, uh, and multiple neighbors reported prowlers before attacks had happened. Uh, and again, this allowed investigators to link all of these crimes, even though they weren't able to catch him yet. In terms of the investigative procedures, detective followed uh, standard crime scene preservation. So all the crime scenes were fortunately preserved well, which helped solve the cold case in the future. Um, so they collected the samples, photographed entry points, had a lot of documentation. They also conducted extensive neighborhood canvassing and gathered reports of suspicious people and vehicles. Um, So eventually, linkage analysis connected the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the original Night Stalker cases into one offender. And when DNA technology advanced in the 90s and 2000s, they were able to confirm these links. Finally, in 2018, the investigators uploaded the unknown offender's DNA profile to GED Match. So that's like a public genealogy database. And when they did that, that allowed them to build a family tree that led to Joseph DeAngelo. When they did this, police conducted surveillance, uh, followed him around, and eventually collected a discarded tissue for confirmation of the match. And uh, the tissue matched with the DNA with 100% certainty, which led to the rest after more than 40 years. So, what shocked most people about this case is who the murderer turned out to be. D'Angelo was a former police officer, and then later worked as a mechanic, and he lived a quiet suburban life, to where his family and neighbors had no idea that he could possibly be responsible for the extensive and heinous violent crime sprees, probably one of the most in U.S. history. Uh, Legal wise, the case reached its conclusion in 2020, when D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 13 kidnapping charges. He also admitted to dozens of rapes that could no longer be prosecuted due to the statute of limitations, unfortunately. Uh, but because of the severity and scale of his crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Public reaction was massive. News outlets across the country and sometimes even outside of the country covered this case. And this became a big example of how forensic genealogy can solve decades old crimes. The survivors of the murderer and families expressed relief and closure, and they then praised law enforcement for their persistence and um, staying committed to solving the case after more than 40 years.